Hello, Knox County 8th grade students. I'm Sarah Lyle, and I teach 8th grade language arts at Vine Middle Magnet School. Today's lesson is based on the week 3 assignments for grade 8 ELA. If you don't have this assignment, it can be found by visiting the KCS website at knoxschools.org. Click where it says Student Resources. If you would like to have this lesson printed, the middle school packets are handed out on Mondays and Wednesdays between 10 and noon at each of our meal distribution sites. A list of those sites can be found under the Meal Distribution tab at the KCS website. Please be sure to complete the entire week's assignment before continuing this video. As we're getting started, if you find this video difficult to understand, please turn on closed captions if you have them available to you. Feel free to adjust the playback speed to slow down the video. Consider watching short clips, pausing, listening, and then watching again. And finally, ask someone in your home to watch the video with you, stop frequently, and talk to a partner about what you heard and understood. The Monday assignment asked you to read and annotate the essay Made You Laugh. As you read, you were supposed to think about your own sense of humor and what makes you laugh. You were asked to consider annotating by underlining key ideas, circling unknown vocabulary words, and asking questions that you might have as you read in the margins. If you know other annotation strategies that you've been taught in class, you should feel free to use those, but these are the annotation strategies that I used this week and that I'm going to go over with you. Also, as we're reading, please feel free to pause after every few paragraphs, think about what you have read, and maybe summarize the most important information by writing it down or discussing it with somebody else who is at home. So here in just a second, I'm going to read the entire essay, and you're going to see my annotations already made on the page. You might notice that your annotations are different than mine. That is totally fine. The purpose of annotating is just to interact with the text in an engaging way so that you start to build background knowledge, so that when it's time to actually answer questions and write about the text, you have some knowledge. All right, I think we're ready to read. Made You Laugh by Mark Tyler Nobleman. Would you like to know a language everyone in the world understands? You already do because you laugh. Any two people from vastly different cultures who don't speak a word of the other's language still know exactly what is meant when the other person laughs. Think of laughter as the unofficial language of Earth, yet how much do any of us really understand about humor? On the laugh track. What makes things funny? Reed asked John Ficarra, the editor of Mad Magazine. After all, he should know. Here's what he said. Monkeys. They're unbeatable. For example, show a photo of a dentist, not funny. Show a photo of a dentist with a monkey in his chair, and it's comedy gold. Try this theory out on a few of your family photos, and you will see. Okay, so monkeys are funny. What else? How about this? In the year 2001, one joke was voted the funniest in the world as part of a project called Laugh Lab. Psychologist Richard Wiseman's goal was to determine what makes people laugh and what is found to be funny among men and women, older and younger people, and people from different countries. His research team tested people in person and asked others to submit opinions online using a giggleometer, which ranked jokes on a scale of 1 to 5. More than 40,000 jokes were tested. You may be saying to yourself, studying jokes, is that a science? But plenty of smart people say yes. Laughter is a biological function. At a certain rhythm, laughter syllables build and then trail off, and they come out in a repetitive, not random sequence. For example, ha ha ho ho he is typical, but ha ho ha, or he ho he just doesn't happen. Babies begin to laugh instinctively when they're about 4 months old, perhaps to form a connection with parents. Those born blind and deaf also laugh. So laughter is not dependent on sight and hearing. Other animals, notably chimps, exhibit a laugh-like behavior when playing with one another. Even rats, when tickled, make high-pitched squeals that can be interpreted as laughter. As you might guess, only a dedicated few know this firsthand. Comedy is serious stuff. Comics know that the same jokes are not funny to everyone everywhere. At High Stand, a writer for comedy great Johnny Carson told Reed, "Everyone who writes comedy needs to know the audience." On the Carson show, everybody would laugh on a Friday night. Nobody would laugh on a Monday. Even within one state or town or family, senses of humor are as varied as the people are. Professional comics do not assume a 10 p.m. audience will like a joke just because a 7 p.m. audience did. Comedians who test jokes for a living say it's hit or miss. It's a tough gig, and you have to have a large threshold for pain, said stand-up comic Jay Nog. Performers whose jokes get a 2-second laugh consider that a significant accomplishment. Timing is critical. Starting stand-up Zubair Simonson said he's learning the hard way that good timing can cause a weak joke to soar, while poor timing can cause a strong joke to falter. Authors and film actors do not often get immediate public feedback, but comics do. What keeps the funny guys going? The laughs and after effects. The best humor has some sort of layer to it. It makes a statement of some kind or comment, says Margie Yuspa, a director at Comedy Central. An example is Dave Chappelle. His comedy is funny on the surface and also often comments on race or social issues. Funny you said that. Comedians have their own theories about humor. What makes us laugh is a surprise change in perspective that connects an unknown with a known idea in a unique manner, said Ronald P. Culberson, a humorist at funsalting.com. For instance, a 3-legged dog walks into an Old West saloon and says, "I'm looking for the man who shot my pa." Ask an average person why humans laugh, and he or she would probably say, because something was funny. But comics need to know what gives the giggles. Their livelihood depends on it. Comedian Anthony DeVito told Reed that people tend to laugh at things that reinforce what they already believe. Comedy tells them they're right. Gary Gulman, a finalist in Last Comic Standing, a reality TV show and comedy competition, gave specifics. Sometimes it's a keen observation about something you thought you lived through. Sometimes it's a juxtaposition of words. Sometimes it's a gesture or a sound. An encyclopedia couldn't do this question justice. What are you laughing at? Yet laughter is not always a planned response to a joke. One study found that 80% of the time we laugh at something that just happens. People often laugh just because someone else does. Like a yawn, a laugh is contagious. That's why some sitcoms use laugh tracks. Laughter is also social, a way to bond with others. After all, how often do you laugh alone? When 2 or more people laugh at the same thing, it is as if nature reminds them of what they have in common. Behavioral neuroscientist Robert R. Provine conducted a 10-year experiment in which he eavesdropped on 2,000 conversations in malls, at parties, and on city sidewalks. He found that the greatest guffaws did not follow intentionally funny statements. People laughed hardest at everyday comments that seemed funny only in a certain social context. "Do you have a rubber band?" is not in and of itself humorous, but it is if it is said in response to, "I like Amelia so much, I wish I could get her attention." Theories of funniness. There are 3 main theories about humor. Release theory. Humor gives a break from tension. In a horror movie, as a character creeps through a dark house, often idiotically, to follow an eerie noise, he might open a door to find a cat playing with a squeeze toy. The audience laughs in relief. Humor also lets us deal with unpleasant or forbidden issues such as death and violence. People are often more comfortable laughing at something shocking said by someone else, though they would never say it themselves. Comedian Keenan Ivory Wayans once said, "Comedy is the flip side of pain. The worst things that happen to you are hysterical in retrospect. But a comedian doesn't need retrospect. He realizes it's funny while he's in the eye of the storm." Superiority theory. Audience members laugh at those who appear to be more stupid than they judge themselves to be. Slapstick humor, such as seeing a guy slip on a banana peel, often falls into this category. This theory dates back to Plato in ancient Greece and was prominent in the Middle Ages when people with deformities were often employed as court jesters. Some comedians exploited this theory by building a routine or even a persona around the idea that they were losers who couldn't catch a break. Larry David, David Letterman, and Woody Allen are all comedians who have done this, each in his own way. Incongruity theory. People laugh when things that are not normally associated with each other are put together. Many comedy duos, from Laurel and Hardy to David Spade and Chris Farley, feature a thin man and a fat man, a visual contrast. People also laugh when there is a difference between what they expect to happen and what actually occurs. They are being led in a certain direction, and then that direction abruptly changes, and then unpredictability makes them laugh. Children see birds all the time without reaction, but if one flies into their classroom through an open window, they will probably explode in giggles. Got laughs? What we laugh at changes as we age. Here are some examples. If the audience is young children, they often like slapstick or silly physical humor. If the audience are elementary school children, they often like puns, simple jokes that play off a sound rather than the meaning of a word, such as, "Let us all go to the salad bar." Teens often like jokes about topics that authority figures would consider rebellious, a way to use humor to deal with nerve-wracking subjects. And adults, particularly well-educated ones, often like satire, which makes fun of the weaknesses of people and society. Generally, children laugh more than adults. One study found that adults laugh 20 times a day, while children laugh 200 times. The secrets of humor. Certain comedic devices turn up again and again in jokes, comic strips, and filmed entertainment because they succeed. There were tricks, said Highstand, of his days writing for The Tonight Show, hosted by Johnny Carson. Things you would see, certain things always got laughs. One of the most popular is often called the rule of threes. That is a pattern in which two non-funny elements are followed by a third that is funny, yet still makes sense within the context. Many jokes start off with a list of three, such as a rabbi, a lawyer, and a duck walk into a bar. As the joke unfolds, the rabbi says something straightforward, then the lawyer does as well, but the duck finishes with something witty or absurd. Three guys were stranded on an island. An antique lamp washed ashore. When the guys touched it, a genie came out. "I'll grant each of you one wish," the genie said. The first guy said, "I want to go home," then disappeared. The second guy said, "I also want to go home," and he too disappeared. The third man suddenly looked sad. He said, "I want my two friends back to keep me company." Certain concepts seem to be more amusing than others. If you tell any joke, involving an animal, and it doesn't matter which one you use, think Donald and Daffy. In the Laugh Lab experiment, scientists determined that the funniest animal is the duck. It is not arbitrary that a duck was used in the rule of threes joke. Do tell, but do it right. There are also known techniques for telling jokes well. Keep it short. Don't include any details that are not necessary to bring you to the punchline. In the genie joke, there was no need to specify if it was a tropical island or to name the castaways. The quicker you tell a joke, the funnier it will be. Be specific. Some comedians swear that a joke is funnier if you say Aquafresh instead of toothpaste. The attention to detail makes the story seem more real. Keep a straight face. Deliver the joke deadpan or without emotion. That way, any strangeness in the joke will seem even stranger because the person telling it doesn't seem to notice. Don't laugh at your own joke. Let your audience decide whether it is funny or foolish or both. Theories and techniques aside, much about humor remains a mystery. According to Highstand, Carson many times said, "I don't understand what makes comedy a sure thing. There is no 100% surefire formula. Meanwhile, for most of us, laughter is never a problem. It does not need to be solved, just enjoyed." Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to quickly go through each of the 5 days assignments, starting with Monday, which was to read and annotate, to think about your own sense of humor as you're annotating, and then underline key ideas, circle unknown vocabulary words, and ask questions in the margins. I'm not going to go over all of my annotations with you. What I annotated is not as important as how I annotated. So I just want to share a few things with you briefly. You might find that you chose some of the same things to take note of, or you might have chose completely different things. that is fine. I would encourage you, if you don't feel confident after I go over this with you, to talk to someone about it, or maybe even reach out to your teacher. Okay, so you will notice that in each section I underlined multiple things. I circled some words that seemed important, but maybe words that I wasn't completely clear on. And then I also asked some questions in the margin. I typed them in. I circled some words down here, biological function, and instinctively, I know the words biological, I know the word function, but I had never thought about it in regards to laughter, so I circled it. Laughter is used through the body, and it's a way that the body functions. I also looked up the word instinctively because it talks about babies laughing instinctively. And so I found out that instinctively means that it happens naturally or without thinking about it. I made another connection down here. Okay, I asked the question about why people laugh at jokes about race or social issues, and then I was pleased that that question was actually answered in this next section. It talks about how people tend to laugh at things that reinforce what they already know or believe. And when I thought about that, I thought about how I grew up somewhere different than East Tennessee. I grew up in Canada. And so there are jokes about Canadian culture that I find funny that you might not. But if I were to tell a joke right now related to East Tennessee, we could probably all relate to that and laugh together. So each day, hopefully you reread the essay. I am obviously not going to read it with you again, but hopefully you reread it on Tuesday before you attempted to answer these questions. Why does laughter seem to qualify as a biological function? What might be the biological function of laughter? In paragraph 6, what purpose does the sentence in parentheses serve? And then in paragraphs 15 to 18, why is unplanned humor often funnier than planned humor? What you're going to notice about the questions on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday is that some of them are text-based questions where you can find the answers directly in the text. And for others, you're going to need to make some inferences based on the evidence, hopefully based on your annotations. Okay, so what you're going to see here is that I've included some sentence stems just to remind you to use that best practice of answering your questions in complete sentences, including using capital letters and punctuation. So hopefully you answered these either on paper or maybe you did it digitally. But if you did, I hope your sentences look similar to these, meaning I hope that you use some words from the question to star your answers. Okay, so if you have your text in front of you and you go back to paragraph 6, you're going to find some direct evidence to help you answer the question, why does laughter seem to qualify as a biological function? So I'm going to go ahead and show you where I got my answer. You can see here that my answer is because people and animals laughed instinctively. And so if I scroll up here to paragraph 6, you can see I actually circled, you might remember I circled that word instinctively. Okay, and it talks about babies and animals and how your senses like sight and hearing do not depend, your laughter does not depend on any of those things. So I used all of my annotations there to help me answer my question. Now this next question, I was also able to answer directly from the text, but I also had to make a small inference. It said, what might be the biological function of laughter? And it suggested in that sentence about babies that maybe babies laugh to connect with their parents. And so I used that to answer the question. And I said the biological function of laughter might be to form a connection with others. All right, so question number 2 says in paragraph 6, why did the author write in parentheses, as you might guess, only a dedicated few know this firsthand? And this was related to the part where it talked about tickling a rat. And so what I know is that anytime parentheses are inserted into a text, the purpose is to provide additional information. So this is an inference that I needed to make based on the text and my prior knowledge. So I used this sentence stem. The author wrote the sentence in parentheses because it adds information, humor, and answers the question that many of us were wondering, who would tickle a rat? Some of this information is true about all parentheses, like adding information, but the part about the humor and the rat is very text specific. And then finally, question number 3, as discussed in paragraphs 15 to 18, why is unplanned humor often funnier than planned humor? And this was the section where I made the connection about how we could all enjoy a joke about East Tennessee weather together. And so my question was my answer was, unplanned humor is often funnier than planned humor because it is based on a shared understanding in a specific social situation. Okay, so if you go back and look at my annotations, okay, you will see here that it talks about when two or more people laugh at the same thing, it is as if nature reminds them of what they have in common. Okay, and how people laugh hardest at everyday comments that seem funny only in certain social contexts. So I was able to answer the question based on my previous annotations. And this reminded me of when you are with your friends and something really funny happens and you laugh hysterically together and you really want to tell somebody about it later, but when you try to explain the joke later, the person doesn't laugh and you end up saying something like, oh, I guess you had to be there. So that is what this reminded me of, when the joke is only funny if you were there for a specific social situation. All right, on to Wednesday. So in this section, we needed to look at context clues to help us understand the meaning of the word retrospect. And then we also had to look at paragraph 25 and 26 to make a distinction between what makes children laugh and what makes adults laugh. And also to think about, make an inference about why children laugh more than adults. So I was able to go back to paragraph 20, and I was able to look at the word retrospect. And what I know about the word retrospect is I know that retro, if I look inside the word, I know that that word part retro has to do with something in the past, right? So you might say those clothes are retro or that music is retro. So retro has to do with the past. And then spect, like spectacles or spectator, has to do with being able to see something. So I had that knowledge about the word and the word parts. So I always start with the word itself first to see if I know a part of the word. But then I go to the text and I look to see if there are any other clues. So here's the word retrospect. I circled it. And it says, the worst things that happen to you are hysterical in retrospect. But a comedian doesn't need retrospect. He realizes it's funny while he's in the eye of the storm. Well, this figurative language, in the eye of the storm, means like you're there in the moment while something is happening. So if retrospect is kind of the opposite of while something is happening, then that is also a clue to me that retrospect has to do with something in the past. I said, I think the word retrospect means to realize something after it happens, because in paragraph 20, it says, and then I pulled out this piece of direct evidence and I put it in quotes, but a comedian doesn't need retrospect. He realizes it's funny while he's in the eye of the storm. Question 5 brings us to paragraphs 25 and 26. And it asks about the distinctions between what makes children laugh versus what makes adults laugh. And if you have that text in front of you, if you look at paragraphs 25 and 26, you're going to see that really nice chart that lays it all out for you. And what you're going to see is that physical humor, silly sounds, that's what makes children laugh, while adults laugh at intellectual humor. And then I had to make an inference about why children laugh more than adults in general. And I thought about how physical humor and silly sounds kind of just happen naturally. So the example from the text about how somebody slips on a banana peel or how a bird flies into the classroom window, children are going to laugh at that. And those things happen naturally and unplanned more often than satire, intellectual humor. So that was my inference that I made based on the evidence I identified when I was annotating. All right, moving on to Thursday. Thursday, we had to look at another vocabulary word, juxtaposition. We had to read the definition, and then we had to look at all of the headings used throughout the essay and try to pick a heading that was an example of juxtaposition. So I'm just very quickly going to show you the definition and those headings. So on page 2, we've got this definition of juxtaposition. Juxtaposition is a technique used by artists and writers, which places normally unassociated ideas, words, and phrases next to one another for an effect. So the examples that popped in my head when I read this definition of juxtaposition were jumbo shrimp and happy tears. So those are each words that you can put together to make meaning, but they cause a reaction because you don't necessarily expect to hear those words together. All right. So here are the headings. On the laugh track, comedy is serious stuff, funny you said that, what are you laughing at, theories of funniness, got laughs, the secrets of humor, and do tell but do it right. And you're going to notice that those headings are in bold letters, okay, which is how you can usually identify them in a text, but also I have highlighted them for you. Okay, so I'm going to give you a second to just read over those again, and then I'm going to show you what I came up with. So once again, using my complete sentences, I said the heading comedy is serious stuff is an example of juxtaposition. I know this because it contains two words that do not seem to go together, comedy and serious. So hopefully you also chose that heading, and hopefully you noticed that the words comedy and serious created a juxtaposition. Then we needed to go back and look at the author's thesis. I found the thesis in the very first paragraph and I underlined it. So I underlined the sentence that says, any two people from vastly different cultures who don't speak a word of the other's language still know exactly what is meant when the other person laughs. So I used that thesis statement to help me answer the question in my own words. And so I said, the author believes laughter is universal, but the reasons people laugh may vary. So that is the thesis statement in my own words based on the evidence from the text. And then I provided evidence, which is the text states, think of laughter as universal, as the universal language of Earth. And then I noted that I found that in paragraph 2. Okay, we're going to move into the very last section quickly. On Friday, you needed to write a summary of one section of the text. And I chose the section called, What Are You Laughing At? Now, I just want to show you this super fast. You might have a graphic organizer or an outline that you use to help you write an objective summary, a summary that just contains facts and details from a text without inserting your own opinion or beliefs. This is just a very basic graphic organizer that I use to help guide my summary. But if you have a strategy for writing summaries that you use in your classroom with your teacher, you should continue to use that. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly share my summary with you. Remember, I was summarizing just one section of the text, and I chose the section called What Are You Laughing At? Because it was the section that I related to the most and that I made the most connections with when I was annotating. So this is my summary. Laughter is contagious, often in groups. When one person laughs, other people join in. When this happens, it is usually because all of the people in the group are making a personal connection and can relate to whatever is funny. Behavioral studies show that people laugh the hardest when something unexpectedly funny happens in the moment that might not be funny to other people when you tell them about it later. Laughter in social situations brings people together. So if you look at my summary and you look at the text, and you look at the annotations that you made or that I made, you will be able to see where I got the evidence to come up with a main idea and then several supporting details. Okay, we are done for today. That's the end of the week 3 assignments. Thank you for engaging with the text and for watching this video today. I hope you'll come back next week for week 4 when another 8th grade ELA Knox County Schools teacher will be here to work with you. And I just want to say have a great week. To all my golden bears, I miss you, and goodbye.